myself, but there is danger, grave danger. I should not even ask you to attempt it. If Perrault was trying to frighten me, he was going the wrong way to work, and so I told him. Becoming less incoherent, he unfolded his plan. It seemed that Ryland was looking for an English secretary, one with a good social manner and presence. It was Perrault's suggestion that I should apply for the post. I would do it myself, mon ami, he explained apologetically, but see you, it is almost impossible for me to disguise myself in the needful manner. I speak the English very well, except when I am excited, but hardly so as to deceive the ear, and even though I were to sacrifice my mustaches, I doubt not but that I should still be recognizable as Hercule Poirot. I doubted it also, and declared myself ready and willing to take up the part and penetrate into Ryland's household. 10-1, he won't engage me anyway, I remarked. Oh, yes, he will. I will arrange for you such testimonials as shall make him lick his lips. The Home Secretary himself shall recommend you. This seemed to be carrying things a bit far, but Perrault waved aside my remonstrances. Oh, yes, he will do it. I investigated for him a little matter which might have caused a grave scandal. All was solved with discretion and delicacy, and now, as you would say, he perches upon my hand like the little bird and pecks the crumbs. Our first step was to engage the services of an artist in make-up. He was a little man with a quaint bird-like turn of the head, not unlike Perrault's own. He considered me some time in silence and then fell to work. When I looked at myself in the glass half an hour afterwards, I was amazed. Special shoes caused me to stand at least 2 inches taller, and the coat I wore was arranged so as to give me a long, lank, weedy look. My eyebrows had been cunningly altered, giving a totally different expression to my face. I wore pads in my cheeks, and the deep tan in my face was a thing of the past. My mustache had gone, and a gold tooth was prominent on one side of my mouth. Your name, said Perrault, is Arthur Neville. God guard you, my friend, for I fear that you go into perilous places. It was with a beating heart that I presented myself at the Savoy at an hour named by Mr. Ryland, and asked to see the great man. After being kept waiting a minute or two, I was shown upstairs to his suite. Ryland was sitting at a table. Spread out in front of him was a letter, which I could see out of the tail of my eye was in the Home Secretary's handwriting. It was my first sight of the American millionaire, and, in spite of myself, I was impressed. He was tall and lean, with a jutting-out chin and slightly hooked nose. His eyes glittered cold and gray behind penthouse brows. He had thick, grizzled hair and a long black cigar, without which, I learned later, he was never seen, protruded rakishly from the corner of his mouth. Sit down, he grunted. I sat. He tapped the letter in front of him. According to this piece here, you're the goods all right, and I don't need to look further. Say, are you well up in the social matters? I said that I thought I could satisfy him in that respect. I mean to say, if I have a lot of dukes and earls and viscounts and such, like down to the country place I've gotten, you'll be able to sort them out all right and place them where they should be round the dining table. Oh, quite easily, I replied, smiling. We exchanged a few more preliminaries, and then I found myself engaged. What Mr. Ryland wanted was a secretary conversant with English society, as he already had an American She was so unaffected and so natural. I could see that there was something on her mind, and at last out it came. "Do you know, Major Neville," she said, "I am really thinking of resigning my post here." I looked somewhat astonished, and she went on hurriedly. "Oh, I know it's a wonderful job to have got, in a way. I suppose most people would think me a fool to throw it up. But I can't stand abuse, Major Neville. To be sworn at like a trooper is more than I can bear. No gentleman would do such a thing. Has Ryland been swearing at you?" She nodded. "Of course, he's always rather irritable and short-tempered. That one expects. It's all in the day's work. But to fly into such an absolute fury over nothing at all, he really looked as though he could have murdered me. And, as I say, over nothing at all." "Tell me about it," I said, keenly interested. As you know, I open all Mr. Ryland's letters. Some I hand on to Mr. Appleby, others I deal with myself, but I do all the preliminary sorting. Now, there are certain letters that come written on blue paper and with a tiny 4 marked on the corner. "I beg your pardon, did you speak?" I had been unable to repress a stifled exclamation, but I hurriedly shook my head and begged her to continue. "Well, as I was saying, these letters come, and there are strict orders that they are never to be opened, but to be handed over to Mr. Ryland intact, and of course I always do so. But there was an unusually heavy mail yesterday morning, and I was opening the letters in a terrific hurry. By mistake, I opened one of these letters. As soon as I saw what I had done, I took it to Mr. Ryland and explained. To my utter amazement, he flew into the most awful rage. As I tell you, I was quite frightened. What was there in the letter, I wonder, to upset him so? Absolutely nothing. That's just the curious part of it. I had read it before I discovered my mistake. It was quite short. I can still remember it word for word, and there was nothing in it that could possibly upset anyone. That's right, George, he drawled. March him around